Hello and welcome to the Executive Appeal, the podcast where brilliant leaders from every corner of the world share their secrets to help you lead smarter, influence better, and succeed faster. Think of it as your cheat code to navigating leadership with clarity and confidence. I'm your host, Alex D. Tremble, CEO of GPS Leadership Solutions. And over the past decade, I've had the privilege of helping executives at Fortune 500 companies and other growing and large organizations navigate leadership, influence, and culture. This podcast is your shortcut to learning what works from the best of the best. And I promise you this. What you're about to hear isn't theory. It's proven strategy that you can use today. And before we jump in, here's a tiny request with a massive impact. Please do hit that like button. Why? Because we live in the attention economy. Your click is the fuel that powers these life-changing ideas to reach more and more people every single day. You're not just liking, you're literally leading a movement. Pretty powerful, right? Now, let's make today extraordinary together. Today we have with us the awesome and amazing Mr. Jay Goninen. Jay serves as the co-founder and president of WrenchWay and has super deep actually roots in the automotive and diesel industries. He actually began his journey at just 9 years old as his family's. As actually, I'm gonna take a second to say this. When I met this guy, he was so passionate. Him and I were both speaking at the HDA Truck Pride conference this year in 2025. And the amount of passion this man has for leading people and growing people and so focused on the automotive and diesel industry, I was like, he's got to be in this for a while. But when he shared that it started at 9 years old in his family's independent repair shop, like I was completely blown away. His career started as a technician, and over time, he transitioned into various management roles within the automotive and diesel sectors. And in addition to leading WrenchWay, he also is the amazing leader and host of another podcast called Beyond the Wrench podcast, where he shares insights and discuss trends in the automotive and technician industry. How are you doing today, kind sir?
Alex, I'm doing fantastic. That was very humbling introduction, probably overstated for me. I know I sat through your presentation in Washington, D.C., and was just blown away by how interesting you were. It was really, really cool to sit there and see you kind of have the audience in the palm of your hand, and you just did a phenomenal job. I was really, really appreciative of being in the audience for your talk.
Sir, look, what do they say? Iron sharpens iron, right? Like
Yeah.
it's mutual. This is completely random, but some of you may know it's weird. I got tripped up a couple times as I was just introducing myself. And I said, Alex D. Tremble, and I paused for a second. And it was weird because I almost said Alex D. Tremble Jr. Because I'm a junior. And
Yeah.
a few years ago, I made a conscious decision to stop going by junior because my biological father wasn't in the picture. He hasn't been in the picture, and he's an a-hole. So decided to kind of break that connection. But it's crazy how those two letters, that one word, even though it was tied to me such a long time ago, has such a significant impact on me today. Again, two letters slash a word. And so again, it's a great transition to you. What do we need to know about your past to help us understand who you are and how you see the world?
Yeah, it's funny you should ask that. And I think looking back over the course of my career, the interesting part was that it really started off with a failure in that I started off as a technician and I wasn't a very good one. I grew up in a shop, just always assumed that I would be good at working on cars, and then went off to trade school, came back to work for my family's automotive repair shop. And I was bad at it, like just didn't really have a passion for it, didn't love working on the cars. And really, I enjoyed talking with people. And so I was envious of the people in the office that were getting to talk with people each and every day. And so just over time, the interesting part about our industry, and I say this a lot, is that the automotive and diesel world has a way of putting you in the place that you're supposed to be. And there are all kinds of opportunities throughout our industry because it is such a big industry. And so I was fortunate enough to be able to stick with it and go into different areas of the industry, areas that really supported my skill set much better than what I initially started off as. So I still have a really, really deep passion for this industry. I think I have a respect level for technicians and the people actually doing the work that's more than most, right? And the reason for that is because I wasn't good at it. So when I see a technician or really anybody that's good with their hands be able to do something, and it could be that person that's building a house or plumbing a house or an electrician or whoever, when they can do something and kind of make something out of nothing or repair something that wasn't working the way it should, I have so much respect for those types of folks. And again, it really kind of stems back to the fact that I wasn't very good with my hands, especially out of school. Now, the funny part out of that is that over the years of sitting behind a computer and on phones and on meetings each and every day, I really started to enjoy tinkering again. And so like going out in the garage and kind of, I still have all the tools and everything like that. So I have really, really enjoyed just being able to tinker and understand how things work. And, I do think, and I give a lot of advice to young technicians because there were things that I think I could have done differently early on in my career and lessons that I learned that I try to instill in young people just to kind of maybe give them some warnings of what works and what doesn't. And then also just, best practices on how to become a true professional. Right. And when I had first started off in a shop, I was probably 20 years old, 19, 20 years old, and just wasn't a professional, didn't go about it the way that I should have, was still very immature. I said that is one major advantage to going to a 4-year school is you have, kind of a little bit of runway to mature. Whereas in a technical like trades type school, you're in and out in a couple of years and expected to produce right away. Right. So so I guess to answer your question or summarize what you were asking there is that my career really started off on a bad foot, and I guess I'm lucky and blessed in a way that it did push me in different directions.
Oh, man, I hate that you answered that last piece like that. I only said it because I had a really great question I wanted to ask you, but now you said something else. I'm like, oh, nah, there's a different question I could ask you. So I'll very quickly push back on the last piece. And then I'll ask the question I want. You can address either one. You said you were lucky, and this is actually not a pushback. I think people all too often forget that luck plays a significant role in our success. And we can't control luck. It's just what happens. Like you happen to be. I think Kevin Hart had been working for a while before he was presenting. He was doing a setup, and some big person happened to be in the audience and saw him. Was like, oh shoot, he's killing it, right? He was lucky. That said, if he hadn't been working so hard and consistently doing sets, the likelihood of him being in the room and that guy was there to see him slim to none, right? And so when we talk about luck, there is a significant portion that you cannot control, but there's a significant portion that you can, which is just taking shots. But I want to say one other thing, and I want to see how you react to this. You talked about appreciating what people basically appreciating those things, those qualities and skills that people have that you don't have. You specifically were talking about technicians and engineers and whatnot. And I think you and I must have grown up in the same household. Like my freaking dad, my brother, they can take anything apart and put it back together. And it's ridiculous. Only thing I can take apart is, I can take apart stuff fairly easily.
It's the back together part.
And even if they get back together, it may not work the way it was supposed to work. So, and it's crazy because I think about even the people in my world, the people I've worked with over years, like people who are super detail oriented. I am not. I am not a detail oriented person. I can do it, but it takes a lot of energy out of me. I'd much rather be at the macro level, and I appreciate those people so much. For everyone who can't do who can do something I can't, I appreciate it so much. And I say it to say, not everyone feels that way. Some people say, oh, that job is less than, or whatever it may be. I'm thinking as you were talking is that it comes from a security standpoint. Like I am confident in myself so much that I don't need to knock down someone because I can't do it. Like I appreciate it. What are your thoughts on that?
I couldn't agree more. I do think there is some level of insecurity if you're trying to ever kind of knock others down. I think everybody, this is a early lesson for me in my career and life in general, was that it took me a while to understand that different people have different talents. And, I think early on, I did have a high standard for myself of being able to do kind of everything. Right. And the more I matured, and I think the further along in my career I got, I really started to understand the importance of leveraging and utilizing folks that have different skill sets than I do. Even as it relates to WrenchWay, when we had first started growing our first company, which was Find a Wrench, I needed extra help. I needed somebody on the operational side. And I was really, really fortunate to come across a really good friend of mine, Mark Wilson, who became my business partner. And he's a CPA by trade. He's good at accounting. He's good at process. He's good at a lot of the things that I'm not good at. And Alex, I'm very similar to you in that probably not the most detailed person in the world, but I do think my strengths lie in relationships and being able to maybe take a step back and see more of that macro type of picture. And not that Mark can't, because he's brilliant at that as well. But yeah. I do think that has been maybe a driver of some of creativity from my end over the years. And then ultimately just kind of, I can't speak to people enough, right? Because there are multiple elements to this where I think people have had such a big impact on my life. And I think back to early days, not good in a shop, kind of go on to a different job. And it was the first job was a customer service role at a diesel, big diesel distributor. And it took one of the people there, who's still a dear friend of mine to this day, to say, hey, you know what? I saw you at a cocktail party last night. Like we were out and having drinks, and it's like, why don't you be that guy on the phones? I'm like, it was the first time somebody kind of gave me permission to be myself at work. Yeah. And from then on, it was kind of like this rocket ship took off, right? Because it was that thing that clicked where I could be comfortable in my own skin, and I could have a personality at work, and I could have fun at work. Prior to that, I didn't even think you could have fun at work, right? So it was one of those things where, I think it almost very much insecure early in my career, and not having the confidence to be able to be myself. And really, once somebody gave me the permission to be myself, that really kind of shot me in the right direction. And I think even then, that kind of led me to really hunt for mentors, right? And really every job I've had, there's been somebody that's had an impact on me one way or another, right? All these jobs that led up to me opening a business, each mentor had a great deal of meaning to me. You see books behind me. Well, when I was growing up, I wouldn't touch a book. I hated reading. And I had one of my early managers say, you don't read? I'm like, no. It's like, you like business? I'm like, yeah, I'm starting to like business a lot. And he was like, well, then you need to read. And then, that ultimately led me to go to a conference with an author named John Spence that spoke on stage. Brilliant speaker, great author. He's got a book called Awesomely Simple. That's really great. And I've been fortunate enough to have him on our podcast a few times now. And one piece of advice that he had for the audience, and this again was another thing where it's a person kind of influencing you and pushing you. When he was on stage, he had said, if you read one book a month, you will put yourself ahead of 99.5% of college graduates, because most quit reading and quit really kind of that growth mindset after they graduate, right? They kind of set down the books and move on. And so that's just always been ingrained in my head from then on. And it is a goal of mine, each year to make sure we knock off at least 12 books in a year. And I know that's not a lot for some folks, but for somebody like me, that was a major stepping stone for me. And it's had a huge impact on my life. And so, I think when you're looking for mentors, it could be somebody that's impacting you each and every day. It could be something where you're searching out those folks in books. I know I've had some very successful people on our podcast that talk about just too recently, very successful people start their days off with some form of inspirational message, right? So they go on and they find their favorite author on YouTube or whoever's going to kind of give them the mindset they need to attack the day. And so it's just at the end of the day, I think it is all people and how you kind of take things from them and add them to your skill set. And I always refer back to, the Michael Jordans and the Kobe Bryants of the world that had always, I think Kobe always added a different skill set to his repertoire every off season, right? So I think it is like the more you can build on your foundation, you got a good foundation, then, kind of keep piling on. And that I do think that really, really puts you in a different position.
Again, honestly, you and I are in 100% alignment, and you, again, brother, you make, I like you. There have been a couple times in my life where I'll be very specific, actually. So, I was running these exec ed programs, did it for about 5 years, was very well known in my space. I was doing in the government space. Every time I went to a training, I'm like, I know that. Every time I read a book, I'm like, I know most of this stuff. And I stopped learning for a while, for a number of years, like maybe 3 years or something like that. Because it's like, I was wasting my time. I knew it, right? I knew my stuff. And I ran into this guy, I can't remember his last name right now. His first name was Alan. And I spoke about professional development. He's a government executive. And he was like, Alex, the same thing happened to me for a number of years. Because he showed me, he literally kept track of each personal development year. And he showed this big gap in years. And he's like, because the same thing, he felt like he knew what he was doing. And he was busy. So why then waste time? But he's like, Alex, I promise you got to think about learning differently at this level. You're reading this new book. You may not align with everything in the book, but if there's 2 or 3 takeaways, then that's a win for you. That could take you to that next level. And so, Jay, as we're talking, especially to the people who are listening, who are already established leaders and executive leaders, it's just the reminder that it's very easy to get caught up in doing, quote unquote, your day job and knowing that you're doing well, but you still have to grow. And now it becomes, I think, much more important with how you curate your information. Like, I very seldomly read random books anymore. Like, they need to be recommended to me by someone who I respect, someone who's referenced it in another book I read that I really liked. How do you decide which books to consume throughout the year? Again, as a founder and CEO of an organization.
So same thing, right? I'll have somebody recommend something to me, or if there's some content that I follow that I really enjoy, then I might buy a book that kind of is the author's putting that content out. I was trying to wrap my mind around how to say that. But content has become very important to me. I think the biggest thing for me right now is if I find myself in a rut for whatever reason, I try to find some form of book to help me improve something I'm struggling at, right? So if there is something that is, I'm really struggling to get my brain around and I can't really understand or comprehend, or maybe it's just, hey, you know what? You get in those daily grinds and you really have a tough time kind of getting your head above water to kind of really look around, I try to identify those books that will help me kind of get in the right mindset. And I think, as you mentioned, there are a lot of books where maybe you're not learning something from, but some of them are just great at rejuvenating you and like getting your mind in the right place, and really inspiring you to read that next book, or listen to that next podcast, or whatever it might be. And so a lot of it comes from that. I've got a book right next to me right now that is this Dave Anderson Unstoppable, and that was recommended to me by one of our clients, and great book. And so he does like a Friday podcast now that I listen to that's only like a minute long, and it's always really, really good. And so I think if you if you're talking to successful people and they're recommending you do something, you should probably do it. And that's one of the things with reading that has been so impactful to me, is that you do find yourself getting those book recommendations from folks. We were just reading Unreasonable Hospitality, great book. And it was one of those, again, that was recommended by a client of ours. So, as you're going through if you're truly listening to the people you're talking to, there are a lot of recommendations that you'll come across that you can read. And then there were times at one point I worked for this company, and we had a consultant, and part of his role was to work directly with me as kind of an emerging leader. And they had us read a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. And I actually think it's probably behind me somewhere.
Yeah.
And it's a hard book to read. It was really, really hard, like for me to get through. And I probably started that book 5 or 6 times before I got all the way, like actually took the time to read all the way through it. But I did get a piece of advice actually from that same author I mentioned earlier, that he reads, I don't know, it's like 300 or 350 books a year. Like he's a machine. He can read a lot. But he had said if he gets like a chapter into it and it's not provoking him to continue to read, he'll gift it to somebody. He gets rid of it. And he says, if the more like you try to push yourself through there, I think the less you're going to retain, and the harder it's going to get to that next great book, right? Like you're kind of almost delaying yourself from getting to the one that is truly going to have an impact on you. So it just, I there's so many good books out there. And if there's something that you're struggling with, or maybe you find yourself in a rut, pick up a book. And I really, really think it'll help put you in the right position.
Jay, as we're talking about content we're consuming, I've been listening to 2 new podcasts. I'm not sure if this idea came from one of those. I'm sure it came from one of them. I'm just not sure which one. One is called, I think it's called it's called Iced Coffee. I think it's called Iced Coffee. With Grand Stefan, and it's the financial podcast. And the other one is called Diary of a CEO. And so it came from one of these podcasts. But they talked about the idea of home ownership. And they're talking about the wealth disparity and how the middle class is shrinking, the lower class is increasing, and the richer upper class is increasing, but that middle class is shrinking. So more people are becoming poorer than they are actually becoming richer, though. And they were talking about AI and the revolution, what's going to happen with opportunity, and so on and so forth. And then someone says, well, yeah, but it is so hard to live nowadays. It's so hard. It's so expensive. Housing is so expensive. How do you expect to buy a house when it's so expensive? And they kind of lean, and they're talking about why, like, just how houses are really expensive nowadays, and comparing it to back in the day when you could buy a house for $45,000 with a white picket fence, and you live you were a shoe salesman, or your shoe repairman, right? And then one guy at the table says, I think that's the problem. I think that most people are still they still believe that buying a house is the right thing for today. And he says, look, back in the day, that was the opportunity. Houses were cheap. That was the opportunity to buy a house. And that's how you got your wealth. And he says, you know what? That's not our opportunity today. Maybe buying a house doesn't make sense today, but we have AI, we have the internet, there's all these other things that are that generation didn't have access to. And I was like, wow, like it has shifted my perspective on like even home ownership, on like, does it make sense? Is it financially and, for us to make sense to have a house? And again, we do, but when we move to the next place, we may rent because it just may make more sense and use the money for something else. So I bring this up to say, I think it's very interesting how we as people, we know we live in a different world, and we know there's so many different opportunities for growth in business and to be a leader. Yet it's so easy to stay tied to the past and what was expected. And now, last thing I'll say on this is I did share this with a friend of mine who I love. We love talking about these things, and he said, "Well, the problem is that the older generation is calling everyone lazy. If these younger generation, they're calling them lazy if you don't have a house. It was so easy to get a house when I was, because I worked hard." And they don't realize how different it is today versus back then. And I told him, I was like, "Yeah, you're right. Many people don't realize that this shifted, but that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they don't understand. It doesn't matter if they don't realize, because we have to operate with our new reality." Just as, again, we don't go too much DEI, but like as a Black dude, there are many people who say that race doesn't matter. And as a Black dude, I'm like, yeah, it does. And so I can't, if I can't convince them, it's okay. I still have to live my life the best way I know how to live it, given my circumstances. So in any reactions to that, I need to talk to someone about this.
What's funny is I think there were a lot of, even for me, undue pressures when I was really, really young. And I was one of those. I don't know how many houses I've had over the years, but I bought a house really early on and actually did well with it. I had flipped the house when I was like 21 or 22 years old and made a little bit of money on it. And then I was like, oh, this is easy. I'm going to do that again. So then I did it again. And then 2008 happened, and then you're upside down on a mortgage, right? And it was a really humbling lesson for me. And really, I look back at it and I'm like, I wish I would have slowed down a little bit, right? Like, not tried to get the house, I think I had the wrong goal in a lot of ways, at the time, and still to this day, travel a lot. And I think I just always had that mindset that, hey, I need to own a house, because if I'm not owning a house, I'm not paying down a mortgage. I'm not building equity, and I'm not doing the things that I'm supposed to be doing. But I was thinking about this and had a conversation with my wife at one point where I'm like, for my 8-year-old son, I think I would tell him, like, don't even worry about buying a house until you're at least 30, right? Yeah. Just don't worry about it. There are other things that you need to take care of. And coming up with the cash to replace a furnace is probably not what you're wanting or desiring to do when you're 25 years old. So being able to slow down a little bit, I think, is hugely important. I think so many people want to jump to kind of that millionaire status right away, right? And I was kind of guilty of that same thing when I was younger. And I don't want that to say that you shouldn't have goals, whether it's financial or professional goals. Obviously, you want goals and you want to be able to kind of always be pushing forward. But I actually think it's very advantageous early in your career to have just an apartment or have something that's very simple to live in. And if you can afford to do so without roommates, that's probably even better. But I think in a lot of cases, the pressures when you're young are probably a little too much, right? And I think you don't have to own a house. Like there are a lot of successful people that don't own homes or don't own houses. I will say a lot of successful people own real estate and have done a good job with investment real estate. And that's great. Like, we've done that ourselves. Yeah. Yeah. We were up to, I think, 52 apartment units at one point. Right. And it's a great business to be in because you have people paying down your mortgage for you.
Mhm.
All of that to say, like, I wanted all that right off the bat. Right. And I think when I look back to when I was 20 or 21 years old, a year felt like an eternity. And when you look at the grand scheme of things, I'm now 42. So, 20 years later, you start to see that a year is not that long.
Yeah.
Even 5 years is not that long. And if you're patient, that might allow you to, rather than buy that furnace, start to stash away some cash and have a side account to where when you do want to buy a house that you're adequately prepared for it. You have a savings account. You are ready for it. And I think so many people rush into it, and just because you can get approved by a bank doesn't necessarily mean you can afford it, right? So like being able to actually just take a step back, take a breath, and just wait till you're absolutely ready. I think that is so important for young people to understand that you shouldn't just force your way into buying a home or any other stupid stupid thing that you can do with money, just because that's the norm, right? Or that's the norm. Just take your time a little bit.
It's crazy. Just real quick, short story. When we bought this first house, um, so I'm someone. My wife and I always live under our means, for the exact reason, so we could grow our net worth and all of that. And I still remember the first realtor I went to, and I was 24. I was something young at the time, and I was like, "Okay, we're gonna buy a house." Like, okay, so we got convinced to buy a house. I'm like, okay, cool, And I told her how much I made. Now it was very good money, especially for my age, very good money. And she proposed this massive house, and I was like, I don't think I can. I don't think I can afford this. She said, No, 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 you can, because and one of my
Realtors are
friends,
salespeople too.
one of my friends who is this big time financial advisor, Dominique Broadway, she looked at my numbers. She was like, Alex, you bet not. You bet not buy anything that big, because then you'll just be house pouring. All your money will go to the thing. And so I shared to say, like, you have to consistently, you being wherever you are in your life, you need to be looking out for what's in your best interest, because everyone's trying to sell you on something, right? Whether it's the McDonald's person selling you on a burger or a real estate person selling you a big house, everyone's trying to sell you. And just be aware of what's important to you and your family versus what, like you said, society says you should want. And you make me think of the other thing, which is when you're talking about building wealth. My wife and I, we check our net worth, I think maybe once a year, something like that. And every year we're like, oh, okay.
Nice.
Yeah, right. And to your point, it wasn't no exciting, again, not knocking anyone who does this. It wasn't no exciting like day trading and buying this coin and flipping that and da, da, da. It was slow, consistent and boring. Just, we've had a strategy, keep doing it. Again, you and I aren't talking necessarily big time investors. Let me say that. We're not financial people, whatever like that. But this is not that show, I should say. But yeah, like everything you're saying, even for me, I'll just say this. My wife and I, we do a lot of traveling, and we are thinking about, we're really planning to having places all across the world that we can just travel to. And, a few years we'll just start traveling even more. And it's crazy because we're still trying to fit our dream, which is just being gone all the time, into this system. We're like, okay, well, we have to have a house here. So we got to buy a house, but it can't be too big because we're not going to be here all the time. It can't be too small because our kid, and we have to buy a house. And it was like, we could just rent. Like, we don't need
Airbnb.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we all fall in that trap. And, I think you're absolutely right that it is truly slow and steady wins the race. And I think when you hear about a lot of those success stories that are kind of the get rich quick, like it happened overnight type stuff, I equate it to almost like the gambler that only talks about their wins at the casino, right? Like there's going to be losses when you're making those big swings. And I think even as it relates to real estate, right? Like if you're buying a property and you can sit on it, you're probably, it's like, or like, kind of the Warren Buffett effect on the investment side, where he's not buying something to flip it right away. He's buying it to hold it for the long haul.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's how you make a lot of money in real estate, right? Like if you buy properties and then flip them right away, that might be nice short-term cash, but you're maybe not building the net worth that you really could if you were to buy that property and hold it for a long time. So, I just, I think the moral of the story there is that while they always say life is short, it's actually pretty long, and it does take time. You can't be so impatient. And, I always listen to Gary Vaynerchuk give advice to young people, and it is wild to me, like how many people are like, I want to be retired by the time I'm 30. And you're like, what would you even do at that point? Like you retire at 30? Like what do you're going to be bored a lot, I think. But I don't know, like everybody's so impatient, and myself included. We just take a step back, take a breath. I think you're putting yourself in a far more sustainable future that you're going to be much happier in.
Another great book to read is, oh my God, they have a number of great books, but it might be Gap and Gain. I think it's the Gap and Gain book. If you haven't read that, really great book. And one of the things the author says is that if you're a senior leader and or an entrepreneur, because that's who he speaks to primarily, he says almost any goal is attainable. Almost any goal attainable, given enough time. Yeah. He's like, if you want to be a millionaire, great, or again for him, multi-millionaire, great, you can do that. If you want to do it within a year, it's probably really hard. But if you're willing to give yourself 10 years, probably much easier, right? Like to your point, we don't need to make it doesn't have to happen tomorrow. And the other thing is just something I've learned recently. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. There are two questions I got to ask before we start closing up. Another thing that I was really frustrated for a number of years because it just felt so hard. I felt like I was always pushing uphill. My business growing, yes, steadily, but it was just consistently something hard. And I felt like I earned some easy, and I finally realized like last year or so that it's always going to be hard. It's always hard as long as you're growing, right? If you're growing and you're doing something new, that new is challenging because you haven't done it before. And so if you stay stagnant, then yeah, things can be a little more breezy. But if you're consistently growing and trying new things, yeah, it's going to be hard. And I think that once I realized that it's going to be consistently hard, and also this made me feel better, and also gave me the freedom to say, okay, there will be seasons when I'm working this hard. Sometimes it's okay to coast for a little bit while you catch your breath. Jay, again, you've started now 2 businesses. What are your ideas on this, on hard?
I think you're absolutely right. It's hard to come to terms with that. And I think the goalpost moves a little bit too, right? If you would have, they always talk about you're probably where you wanted to be 5 years ago, but you kind of keep pushing the goalpost further and further out, right? And so I think it's healthy to kind of be in that state of discomfort, because if you are just comfortable, you're really not pushing yourself forward anymore. And I struggle with that as much as anybody, right? That to understand the headwinds that are kind of coming at you constantly, and that there are going to be some obstacles that you have to try and get around. And, I think, again, another mentor of mine talked me through that a little bit, and saying that you've got to change your mindset to, instead of have the challenges come to you and almost like you're getting blindsided every time, change your mindset to go attack those, and change your mindset to really be looking for those opportunities to change things, right? Or solve problems, because that does bring you some type of satisfaction. That does give you some type of purpose. And if you're out helping people and you're solving problems, I think that purpose is necessary, right? You see so many people that when they retire, maybe lose that sense of purpose. And how often have you heard like somebody retired and then they passed away like a year later, right? And
Yeah,
it stinks to see that. But I do think there is some truth to that, and I think my family has raised me that way, that none of them will ever retire, right? Like, and it's not because
yeah.
they can't financially, it's because they just don't want to stop working. Uh, and so I think there are, you had mentioned it earlier, the seasons of life. I think in general, it's so important to understand that there are going to be ups and downs. There are going to be challenges along the way. I don't think that even the richest people in the world, I don't think that every day is easy for anybody, right? Because you're always going to have people relying on you. You're always going to have, these obstacles unless you just kind of live a very secluded life. And even at that point, I don't think you're probably very happy, right? So why not embrace those challenges and kind of take them head on, really go on the offensive side rather than the defensive side, and try to hunt down those challenges and really go solve some problems. I think that, I was reading something the other day where it talked about happiness is in the hard, meaning that like when you do something difficult and you accomplish something, you're going to be happy at the end of that. Whereas if it's just easy and you're kind of just, I don't know, like not, you're just kind of living life on autopilot, I don't think you get those opportunities to meet those obstacles and truly get that happiness that comes out of doing something hard.
Jay, you're freaking amazing. One thing, and then I'm gonna ask you two questions, lightning round, and then we're gonna open the space for you. So one thing, when you talk about the goalpost, I want everyone right now to think about what goalposts have you moved in your life. When you brought that up, you made me immediately think of. I remember when I was young, when I was a young pup, and I was like, dude, all I need to make is 100 grand. If I make 100 grand, it's life is on easy street. Like I'll be rich. Right? I remember I hit my goal was to hit 100 grand by 30. I hit that goal at 28, but right before I hit that goal, I was like, this ain't a lot of money. Like after taxes and it's like how many times do we move those goalposts? And I think, like you said, I think we should be very intentional. It's last thing I'll say on this. I think we should be very intentional with writing down those goals, not only because writing down goals is a really good thing to do, good practice, but two, because it will, if you can keep them written down, then you can at least acknowledge the goalpost that you have passed, and you can celebrate. Oh shoot, I forgot. This was the initial goal. I hit that last year. Oh, I think that's really powerful. Jay, questions for you. What is a hard truth you had to learn that made you a better executive leader?
I think the biggest thing for me was, over the years, I had talked about the importance of reading, but the hard truth for me was that you could read anything in a book, but until you lived it, it didn't really hold a match to it, right? Like it was like you could read about it and kind of understand some of the challenges and the choppy waters ahead that they were going to come. And I do think that put me in a different mindset in terms of preparing to start a business. But until you go through it and you live it, it is really, really hard to explain to somebody else how difficult that is. And the ups and downs of owning any business. I give anybody that's ever like owned a business and run a business and tried to make payroll when funds were tight, right? Like it is a whole different level of stress, and it's one of those things that I thought I understood going into business for myself. And I think I did a decent job preparing myself for that. But until you're in it, man, it's hard. It's hard to explain to somebody how difficult it can be.
Yes. and to that book reading part, I hope I'm never in a situation where someone operates on me, a doctor operates on me, and they only ever read about the operation.
Yeah.
Very,
Great point.
very different. Very different.
I stayed at a Holiday Inn last night. I'm good.
So the other question is, what? Oh my God, what is the worst advice that you've ever received?
I think it goes back to a lot of those. This isn't one specific piece of advice. I think this is content in general, or books that I had read early on in my life where you did feel those pressures to buy a house early, or you felt those pressures to become super successful very, very early in your career. And so I think as I look at bad advice, a lot of it came from the investment side of things, right? And I do think, I give Dave Ramsey a lot of credit because I think that was one thing that, from a financial perspective, did really change my life in my mid 20s, just starting to read some of his stuff because it was a lot more of that be patient, be smart, that type of messaging rather than the get rich quick schemes that a lot of people came out with. So, I think the investment advice early on in my life, I had just, I don't know, I think probably made some poor choices in investments, made some really good ones, but also some bad ones. And like, I think there are times where I look back at that, and I think everybody has things in their life that they kind of kick themselves for doing. And I'm no different than that, right? Like there were times where I could have handled something differently. Uh, I do think, even reflecting on that, you do learn things out of stuff though, right? And so over the years, I think I have viewed those more as learning lessons, and been able to take what I've learned and apply it to the next thing, knowing, hey, I'm probably going to screw something up maybe within the next like hour, but I'm going to learn something out of that I can use to make my life better. And I don't beat myself up as much as I used to, right? Like I think when I'd make a mistake when I was in my 20s, it was devastating. And now if I make a mistake, I think some of it comes down to like, hey, I've done some fairly good stuff in my career and I have confidence in that, I feel like I'm pretty good at what I do. So if I make a mistake, it's not the end of the world. Granted, I'll still beat myself up a little bit, but it's not nearly like, if I was 25 and I made a mistake, it was the end of the world, right? Like it stunk and it wasn't great, but I've greatly changed my perspective on that over the years.
Those are both amazing. One last bit of advice that was shared with me on that was this guy who was telling me about investing in stocks. I had made a bunch of mistakes trying to run the bandwagon, right? Buy this one, sell this one. And he was like, look, that's the cost of education. Yeah, you didn't go to college, right? I mean, you didn't go to, this for college. That was paying for education. This is you paying to learn. This is not the best way to do this. And I was like, yeah, okay, it's the cost of education. I get it.
It's good advice.
Can I open the table, the platform for you? What do you like to share with our audience as we wrap up?
Big thing for me, especially for those that aren't overly familiar with the automotive, diesel, or collision industries, is that I would encourage people to kind of open their eyes to how talented folks are in this industry, the people that are doing the work. I think I was in a seminar the other day that where they talked about how the average car now has 100 million lines of code in it. These are really, really skilled people that are doing some incredible things, and the industry has really, really changed. I think the perception that a lot of folks have on whether it's an automotive technician or a diesel technician is that, they're greasy and grimy, and it's really changed over the years. It is very advanced. The equipment they're working with is crazy, crazy technological, crazy expensive. It's not cheap equipment that they're working with. A lot of times everything they're working with is computer based. And so ultimately, whether it's our trade or other trades, there's some really, really talented people out there. And I think if you open your eyes and maybe don't look down on folks that are doing something different than you are, you'll learn some things, and you'll learn how talented they are. If you ever get a chance, go spend an afternoon in a shop. As weird as that sounds to maybe go job shadow as an adult, I do think you could learn a lot about how the process works, and how smart some of these folks are. So for me, I'm very, very passionate about that piece, and making sure we shine a light on how many great and talented people there are out there doing some things that you might not even ever heard of that person, right? Like, so just being able to open your eyes a little bit, I think it'd surprise you.
Jay, I just want to underscore everything you just said really quickly. It was explained to me, because I do work in this industry as well, and I love working with techs and leaders in the automotive industry. And how it was explained to me is, people don't realize that your car is nothing more than a phone on wheels.
Yeah.
It is that much technology within your vehicles. So again, these people who are working on these vehicles, making these things run and fixing them and putting them together and creating new innovative ways to do things so that you can drive safer and more comfortable. Like, these people are amazing. And I do think, unfortunately, this entire industry is overlooked when it comes from a standpoint of people coming through education looking for opportunities. Like, dude, it's a massive industry, but everyone just thinks about, doctor, lawyer, firefighter. I'm being super old school now, but you get the point. Like, this is just an amazing industry. I love working with leaders. I remember when I worked with some guys with Subaru, then just these guys are so amazing, or these people are so amazing.
Yeah.
Jay, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate you and your time and everything you've shared with us. Everyone, if you found anything of value, please do us a favor, click the like button, make sure you subscribe. Don't just look back, reach back, because again, you're the energy, you're literally the fuel that pushes this show forward. So as always, I encourage you, stay strong, stay positive, and definitely stay moving. See ya. Thanks for listening to The Executive Appeal with Alex Tremble. I invite you to follow The Executive Appeal wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow me, your host, Alex Tremble, across all socials or via email for exclusive webinars, courses, and in speaking engagements on continued topics of executive leadership. So until next time, stay strong, stay positive, and definitely stay moving.